Thank you for everybody coming out this evening. My name is Miko Bursic, and I'm the athletic director for the City of Douglasville. Today we are here at Hunter Memorial Park to honor a great man, a father, a ball player, a coach, and a mentor. It is my pleasure to rename the red field in honor of Mr. William T-Bone Taylor Phillips for his hard work both on and off the field and giving back to the community. I was asked several times about Taylor in regards to this event. And yes, he is still living strong. He's right here. Taylor has lived a very impressive life. He served in the military, spent many seasons playing minor league baseball, and completing 6 years of service in the professional baseball, and winning a World Series with the 1957 Milwaukee Braves. Taylor had many accomplishments both on and off the field, but one of his greatest is having a lasting impression on every life that he touched. Taylor has dedicated countless hours developing the youth in America's favorite pastime, the wonderful game of baseball. Taylor would never say no when a favor was asked of him. He was honored when asked to throw out the first pitch of the 2014 spring Hunter Park youth baseball season. Taylor would always be there for the youth and would incorporate his baseball lessons with life lessons. At that time, we did not realize his intentions, but it was more than just baseball. His words of wisdom through baseball were teaching us to become hardworking and respectful young men. I had the pleasure of playing with Mr. Taylor Phillips for many years, including winning a state championship with him in 2002 with the American Legion Post 145 Douglasville team. Some of those teammates are here today. Thank you for coming. That is a great memory, but what I cherish most is the relationship I created with Mr. Phillips 15 plus years ago. If you ever sit down and talk to Taylor, you know he would always put others before himself. When the field dedication was approved, I brought my son with me, Austin, over to his house to tell him the great news. And the first words that came out of his mouth were, "What about Terry Harper?" And that is just an example of what an outstanding man he is, putting others before himself. Taylor showed me how to care and care for others. And he has played a major role in my career choice because I care about the kids in the community and want to continue his legacy. So when you play on a field with a name, which is the one behind us, you realize that it is a place of history. And the kids here today will know and understand what Taylor Phillips is and what he stands for. The City of Douglasville chose to rename the red field Taylor Phillips Field because that is a fundamental age where you begin developing skills, not just baseball, but life skills. To the ball players here today, out there, thank you for coming. I created some baseball cards for Mr. Phillips to autograph at the end of today's event, so make sure you get one of those before you leave. Today we have several people speaking to honor Mr. Taylor Phillips. So tonight's starting lineup will begin with our Honorable Mayor, Rochelle Robinson. Next we'll have MARCIA Hampton, the city manager. And in the 3-hole we'll have Councilman Coach Watts. And in the cleanout spot we'll have Mr. John Phillips. At the conclusion of Mr. Phillips' speech, we will unveil the sign for Phillips Field. But first, I'd like to have a moment of prayer by Mr. Kyle Phillips. Kyle?
Thank you, Miko. All right, Lord, thank you for this beautiful day that you presented us with, and we thank you for all the kindness that's been showed to our family. I ask you, Lord, that you would bless all the young men that are up and coming. Let them have the same dreams that are answered, not only on the field, but in life. We thank you, Lord, for our Father. We thank you, Lord, for this city, this county, the state, the country we live in. Thank you, Lord, for being an American. And we give you all the praise and glory, Lord. Amen.
What a blessing. It's so exciting to be here. My name's Rochelle Robinson. I'm mayor of the City of Douglasville. And I am so excited to be here with Mr. Taylor Phillips and his beautiful wife and son and the rest of the family. I said to Mr. Phillips, I said, "Are you Mr. Taylor Phillips?" He said, "Taylor Phillips been dead for 45 years. Mr. Phillips been dead. My name's Taylor." So, Mr. Taylor, I have a funny story I'm going to talk and say about you. My son Joel played baseball right here in Hunter Park from the age of 5 until he was 12, and then he switched over to swimming, and so he's a serious swimmer, a senior in high school now on the swim team. But today I went in because he's in the IB program, and he's a senior in high school getting ready for college, and so we have a pinning ceremony tonight. And while I was getting the information, the administrator, Miss Ellis, said to me, she said, "Well, let me tell you something about Mr. Phillips. My son Jonathan played, and he called him Bruce the whole time. He played at the post. And he said, 'You remind me of Bruce from 1956. I remember you.'" And she laughed. She said, "They played out in the chicken house." It was a chicken house, right? Throwing, pitching, and throwing balls, and her son just loved to play. So they still remember you, and they love you and love the life lessons that you put into him. So thank you for what you've done all across this community with folks that have gone on to play, and we're so very proud of you that you represented us in the major leagues and all over, and in the military. I was in the Army National Guard. I did my basic at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So Fort McPherson, a good Army. You know, they can call all kinds of military people different things, but there's only one person that they call a soldier, and that's the Army. So thank you so much for your service to the United States, to this city, to our great nation. We really appreciate everything that you've done, and we're so excited and honored that you're from Douglasville, and we have an opportunity to name this field after you. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. God bless you and your family. Thank you.
I'm Marcia Hampton, City Manager for the City of Douglasville. I won't say a long set of words, but I know we do have some elected officials who are here, specifically representing the City of Douglasville. I know Councilman Watts is here to say a few words after I do, but we also have Councilman Siegel, who's in the back. I did see Councilman Adams, and if there are other elected officials, if you can just raise your hand, specifically those who are with the city, and thank you, and Councilman Adams is there over to my left. Phillips family, I just want to say thank you for allowing the City of Douglasville to be a part of your family and presenting you with this ceremony today. Thank you, Miko, and your staff for all that you were able to do. One of the things for us as city employees that we get to do that's a great honor for the public is to serve the public. So as public servants, that's what we're here to do. So we hope and truly hope that we're able to provide this for your family for lifelong generations to come. So thank you for allowing us to have that opportunity. Councilman Watts.
A few minutes ago when I got here, this is the first time that I've ever actually met Mr. Phillips. I've lived in Douglasville for a long time. I've heard about Mr. Phillips, but I had the pleasure of shaking his hand and just having a short conversation with him. And I've talked to people and that have known Mr. Phillips, have played for Mr. Phillips, that speak so highly of him. And I see a lot of young ball players here. And it makes me think that we probably don't honor the people that came before us as much as we should. I think that Mr. Phillips has a legacy. Already several things have been mentioned about him. I love the fact that he went to UGA on a college scholarship, but you know, he ended up in the minor leagues and had a great career in the minor leagues before he made it to the major leagues, and actually played on a World Series champion, the Milwaukee Braves, before they moved to Atlanta. And I would like to see coaches talking to their players and letting them know about the people that came before them. One of the things I read about Mr. Phillips is he and the people that got together to play ball back when he was younger, they were playing games before there was an actual Little League here in Douglasville. And one of the quotes that I read about that Mr. Phillips said was that they played for fun. And of course, that's what we all think that we're doing when we're playing. But I think that Mr. Phillips comes from a time where when getting a bunch of guys together and just playing just for the fun of it, there was no trophy waiting on them, no banquet at the end of the season. And I just think that's neat. I love the fact that Mr. Phillips served his country, but he kept in touch with baseball, and after he was honorably discharged from the Army, that's when his major league career kind of kicked off, and he probably played against, I know Satchel Paige was mentioned, just some of the greats that he probably played against or played with, whether it was in spring training or people like Mickey Mantle, all these big names that we've heard about. A lot of us I guess I just would like to wrap it up by saying I've totally gone off the reservation on my notes here. One of the things that I'm impressed about when I learn about Taylor Phillips, and when I see the articles and hear the comments from Amigo Bursich, who played for Mr. Phillips, and also Matt Capps, who I haven't talked to in a while. He grew up next door to me, but I know Mr. Phillips had an impact on him, and he went on to have a very productive major league career. So I know that he has influenced a lot of young people, whether they went on to play major league ball or their career was over when their last American Legion game was played. The impact that a Taylor Phillips has on the young people like that can't be measured until you see what they've gone on to become. And you look around, and I'm sure there's a lot of former ball players that are very successful people standing around this pavilion right now that owe a portion of their success to a man like Taylor Phillips. So I would just like to tell Mr. Phillips that even though today is the first time I ever shook your hand and have met you, I've gotten to know you just by reading some articles about you, and I'm honored to be here, and I just thank you for your contribution to your hometown. After you left and kind of made it big, you came back, raised a fantastic family, and went on to impact young lives. And it doesn't get any better than that, from me, from my perspective, it doesn't get any better than that. So thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you.
I'm John Phillips. I'm the baby of this crew of Taylor and Betty Phillips, and I'm honored to be up here today. I'm gonna definitely get off the reservation. I'm shocked at the turnout that's here. I didn't know what was gonna show up here. I didn't know who all was gonna be here today, and I want to tell you guys thank you for coming. I see my good friend Mr. Terry Harper back here today. There's another one right here that paved the way for a lot of you young kids in the back. Mayor Robinson, thank you for giving us this opportunity. Really, really appreciate it. A couple people I want to say thank you to here. Jenna Langley right here. Her grandmother, Aunt Betty May, was my dad's sister. My Uncle Calvin back here, right behind Dad. These guys, Dad wanted me to mention the New Georgia Baptist Church that was here today. And I'm going to throw it back a little further than that. There's a lot of people it's here today, dating back to two of my lifelong friends back there, Keith Weir, Jeff Peters. Another one of my first teammates, Donnie Burris, his mom and dad are here. Going back from Milford days, South Cobb days. It's amazing to see this here tonight. So I'm definitely going to get off the reservation for sure. And we're going to skip all over the place, and I apologize for this. I'm going to try to get through this as fast as I can. But I'm going to talk about the thing I want to talk about, and when I get done, I'm going to bring up Cody Williams sitting over here. Cody wrote Dad a letter. I guess this letter's 10, 12 years old now. And I think that's going to best define from the young perspective of who this guy is. And I want to talk about the history of what we're looking at here. Dad was born in 1933. He moved to Douglasville as a small child. He was raised right down here on Bankhead Highway to Amos and Jewel Phillips. His sister, Betty May, was the oldest one of the group. Her son Mark's here, is right over there. And Uncle Calvin here, sitting right here. And they played baseball. They just played. Uncle Calvin was his catcher through high school, and Dad learned to pitch at an early age. And the funny thing for me is hearing my dad talk about Uncle Calvin catching out. If you guys were to go out Bankhead Highway, there's a little white house that sits up on the hill crossing railroad tracks with a bunch of rocks out in the front yard, a bunch of big rocks. And Dad would tell these funny stories. And I remember one time my grandma Jewel told me a funny one, and I'm going to lead into this, but I just couldn't imagine Dad pitching to Uncle Calvin, Aunt Betty May hitting. I really don't know how much catcher's equipment, batting helmets, and that wooden plank, and I don't know what that thing, it had to have been a telephone pole back then, in Aunt Betty May's hands, hitting off of him. And I've heard the stories of the foul balls, the line drives bouncing off the little white house up on the hill across from the tracks. Maybe even a window or two getting broke here and there. Early on, it was obvious that Dad had a lot of talent. He started playing in men's leagues, him and Uncle Calvin, at age 14, 15 years old. And then their dad got a wise idea that they would take him over, I guess, as one of their relatives that was a guard at the Cobb County prison system. And they played in the prison leagues over there. And 14, 15 years old, these grown men. And Dad graduated high school here in Douglas County in 1950. He signed a baseball scholarship to the University of Georgia. His American Legion coach was a guy by the name of Schuler Antley, who coached a guy by the name of Whitlow Wyatt, who wound up being a starting pitcher in the All-Star game. And this guy led Dad to the University of Georgia. And I don't think Dad really wanted to go to school. And I think the only thing he wanted to do was play baseball. And I know at an early age, as these kids in the back here, and Keith and Jeff and I grew up playing wiffle ball and tennis ball out in the cul-de-sacs. That's all us kids ever wanted to do was just play ball. David Yates, I see him back there. Brett Chandler, Brad Morse, all these guys played for Dad. And Dad didn't want to be at Georgia. And he convinced his mama and daddy that he wanted to leave and walk off from a full baseball scholarship at the University of Georgia to pursue a dream. His mom and dad weren't keen on it, and I think they fought it for a while. And after Dad and I sat around and talked about this, the Phillies and the Cardinals wanted to sign him. And Grandpa Amos said, absolutely not, son. You are not going to sign with him. So Dad wound up signing with the Atlanta Crackers for $2,500, making $175 a month. And he turned down, he said, a lot more money from those other two teams. And his dad said, son, if you're going to sign, I'm going to come watch you play. And I don't know how many people here are familiar with the Atlanta Crackers, but they played in Ponce de Leon Park under the old magnolia tree. And I heard stories of Sacco Sockwell, Bob Montag, some of these guys as a kid growing up, and talking about hitting home runs on those train carts as they'd go across the railroad tracks and they'd wind up in California somewhere. For you young kids didn't know what that was, I think Jackie Robinson might have played in that league. I think maybe Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, some of those guys, that good Southern League. So, Terry, I think you're a little too young. You never got to play there, did you? Okay, all right, just making sure. All right, so in 1951, to start this professional journey, Dad's first year in professional baseball, he signs with the Crackers, and they send him to Waycross, Georgia. He wins 10 games, making $175 a month. The next year, 1952, he goes back. He goes 21-10 for $200 a month. $200 a month. And then in 1953, his mom and daddy got to see that dream come true. He got called up, got to play with the Atlanta Crackers. That year, he won 11 games. And the rumor has it, he made more money on handshakes after the game than his monthly salary was. So, that's the truth. That's the truth. So, in 1954, the Korean conflict or the Korean War came into play. I guess Dad got drafted. He winds up in the military in Fort Mac. 1954 and 1955, they win the All-Service World Series. And they played all over the world, all over the country. And I guess about the only name that, the one name I always hear about is Ted Williams. I guess he flew fighter pilots. He was a fighter pilot during that, but a lot of these, and I guess he played in that league too. But all these guys who played professional baseball came back and they let them play in this league, and they barnstormed all over the place to play for the soldiers. And in 1956, Dad gets out of the Korean War. It's a big year for Dad. It's a real big year. This kid's got 2 years, 3 years minor league baseball experience. Can't be but 20 years old, 21 years old. And I'm going to stop here and I'm going to tell you guys about a phone call I made when I was 21 years old. It had to have been the middle of June, 1996. 1996, I make a phone call to my dad after winning my first professional baseball game. And I said, Dad, I want to tell you something. This won my first professional baseball game. He said, son, I done won 5 in the big leagues time you won your first one in the minor leagues. He knew how to make me feel good, and so gave me something to shoot for. 1956, we start out with Wichita Braves. Dad played on the worst team. It's like being on this Atlanta Braves team now. They only played a minor league season, and I don't know how many games they played back then that they lost to rainouts or whatever, but they were 65 and 88. Dad went 2-2 on that terrible team, and his last appearance on that team would be June the 4th. And Miko spoke about history. And Terry Harper's got stories of history. Everybody in this place has got stories of history. But this baseball history is something you can't get back. And I didn't realize what this history was until a few years ago. Dad and I started talking about people he played with, the things that went on. We started talking about the Negro Leagues, barnstorming in the Negro Leagues, and all the things that went on with it. And Dad tells this awesome story. That year, on June the 4th, 1956, Dad pitches a complete game. He loses 2-1 in 11 innings. And during this game, his manager, for all you kids back here, and for everybody sitting in here, this one's hard to swallow. A guy by the name of George Selkirk walks out. Anybody in this room ever heard of George Selkirk? Nobody's heard of him. He wore number 3. He played for the New York Yankees, and he took George Herman Ruth's place in that lineup. And Selkirk walks out to Dad in the middle of the game, and he says, hey, son, you read the paper much? And Dad said, I read it every day. Why? And Dad's like perplexed, like, I'm trying to pitch, and this guy's out here cracking jokes. And he looks at him and he says, you ever read the want ads? And Dad said, no, sir. He goes, you better start reading them because there's a lot of openings for a used car salesman. Let's get this game going. And he trots off, and Dad gets beat 2-1 in 11 innings, complete game. 2 days later, June the 6th, Dad gets the call to the big leagues. And it changed his life from that point forward. That's why we're here today. And Dad gets called up, Milwaukee, June 6th. That year, in half a year, he goes on to finish second in the Rookie of the Year balloting behind future Hall of Famer Frank Robinson. Dad won his first Major League start, 3-1 against the Cardinals on a nifty 3-hitter that was broke up by Stan Musial, getting one of those hits. That's a pretty big name right there. That winter, Dad went on to play in Puerto Rico, in Caguas, and their team would win the Caribbean Winter League World Series. That's big-time baseball right there. Play with the likes of, I think he told me that Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, left-handed pitcher from the Los Angeles Dodgers that quit pitching one day for no reason, named Sandy Koufax. They all were on the same team together that year. 1957, Dad would go on, the Milwaukee Braves would go on to win the World Series against the New York Yankees. And we all know that. But the one lasting fact that come out of that year that I don't think anybody in this pavilion knows, Dad set a record that's still held today. He gave up 10 earned runs in an inning while playing the Brooklyn Dodgers. The funny thing is the former Braves announcer, Ernie Johnson, gave up 5 in the inning before. And as me and Dad talked about today, I guess that he laid on the grenade for that team that day and just took one. Dad played with or against 35 or so Hall of Famers, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Warren Spahn, Eddie Matthews, Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente. One of my favorite stories of all time is Dad telling me about Satchel Paige. And Satchel Paige signed a contract with the Braves 1969 or 70 when Dad got pulled up on the last year in the big leagues. We got put up on the roster at the end of the year. And Dad asked him when he was throwing batting practice and stuff, and Dad asked him, he said, "Hey, Satch, what'd you do this winter?" He said, "Oh, I got loose and played catch and got in shape." And Dad said, "Oh, you did?" He goes, "Who'd you play with?" He goes, "My 3-year-old grandson." And so Satchel Paige, that's a big name too. Larry Doby, second black professional baseball player. Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, Sam Musial, Ted Williams, Red Shandies. Dad even told me this story this year after I called him and I was talking about a guy by the name of Vince Scully. Dad said, "You know, son, I rode the elevator with him one day and he told me I pitched a good game the night before." So this year when Vince Scully walks out at 88, I guess my last tie to my father, being a major leaguer, walks out the door. A couple other things that goes without being said that people don't know people don't know. Taylor Phillips was on the last team to ever play in Cuba until this April. I think he told me they were in Buffalo and they went down and played. And then that's when the Cuban conflict came in and they shut it down. He never much on hitting. And I can honestly say this because I never was much on hitting either. And there was a man by the name of James Beavers one time. James is the coach of the East Cobb Yankees, and you guys might know who that guy is. I played for him for a while. A lot of these guys in the major leagues, the Braves have, and Dansby Swanson, some of those guys played for him. James still coaches over in East Cobb. I'll never forget one day, playing at Georgia Tech. James walks up and says, "Hey, T-Bone, I saw you only hit like 100. Dad says, "Yeah." James made a funny joke at him. A couple days later, James says, "How you doing, T-Bone?" He said, "James, I'm just beat up and I'm tired." He said, "What from?" He goes, "James, I've been up for a day or so." James says, "What's wrong? You can't sleep?" He goes, "Yeah, I can't sleep. I've been looking for your name in the baseball reference guide and I can't find it anywhere in there." So going on with that, it's always been fun to hear Dad's history in his past. And one of the things that I can say that Dad was a part of, and I guess it would be 1965, 1966, Dad threw the last ever pitch in Ponce de Leon Park for the Atlanta Crackers. And I guess it was the Minnesota Twins at that point, before the Atlanta Braves arrived from Milwaukee. And I tell another story right quick. My brother and I were talking one day, and Kyle just can't remember very well. He said, "You know, John," he goes, "you know Daddy's pitching coach was?" And I said, "Who?" He said, "Charlie Root." Anybody in here know who Charlie Root was? Besides my son? Charlie Root was Dad's pitching coach of the Milwaukee Braves. Charlie Root was the man who just happened to throw the pitch to Babe Ruth that Babe Ruth pointed and he hit the home run. And according to Dad, he really wasn't pointing. He said there was a bunch of flies out there and Dad was shooing them away. Babe was shooting them away. And if whenever they wanted to get on Charlie, Dad said they all just point at him like this. And they said Charlie would come out of his shoes and go after him because I guess he lives forever as the guy who got pointed on. You know, I'm honored and I'm glad, and I thank the good Lord every day that Betty Jean's my mother and Taylor Phillips is my father. And he's laid the groundwork and she's laid the groundwork, and her patience is unending to allow this man to come day in and day out to a ballpark to spend with Cody Williams, Brad Morris, Brett Chandler, Keith Weir, Jeff Peters. To spend the time he spent with other people's kids, changing their lives and giving them a chance in life. I'm honored that he laid that groundwork for me to understand what it's like to be a servant in the community, to give back, what it means to be loyal to where you come from and never forget where you come from. I'm thankful for that. And I have a saying in my life that I use. And time is love, and love is time. And I found out a long time ago, when you love something, you give it time. And when you spend time with something, you give it love. And it's dedication to something bigger than you that will be lasting impressions forever. Life after baseball was Taylor's greatest reward, in my opinion. He's always trying to give back freely to others, to share a game that had been so good to him. Started in the 70s, coaching with my brother Kyle, and it just finished 7 years ago. My mother and father had had a conversation. I guess it just came to an end. Mom always encouraged him, supported him with baseball, and I think it expected that he'd coach forever. One of the scariest moments of my life happened on that field right over there, and I think Miko, Brett, and Brad, and some of those guys might have been on that team. Dad was throwing batting practice, and there was a line drive hit back up the middle that went through a net, and it hit Dad in the back. He continued to throw batting practice for about an hour and a half. And I got a call from my mom, and she said, son, I just don't feel good. Your daddy's in the hospital. Would you mind going to see him? So I drove over to Cobb General. I went there and I sat with him for about 5, 6, 7 hours maybe. There was a really bad car wreck, and a couple little girls had gotten hurt real bad, and there might have been a fatality with it. And they come in there and they said, hey, if you guys don't mind, we're just going to give it a little bit. We need to give some attention to them. So a couple hours later, Dad looked at me and said, son, I don't feel good, very good at all. And he's starting to get discolored, and he goes, I'm hurting really, really bad. So I went and found the doctor. I come back, and that rib that he broke had went through his spleen. And Dad laid in a hospital bed. And he looked at me and he said, son, he goes, I want you to always be the man I raised you to be. I want you to love the Lord. Reality hit me that night. And it made me start to think about how thankful I am. It started to make me think about the things that I had in life, and the things that I've been given, and what he and my mom had meant to me. And I looked at him and I said, look here, old man, you ain't gonna die on me. I said, you wait till the rest of them get here. So we sat there for another 15, 20 minutes, and they stood him up to be operated on. There's a couple people in this room that I want to say thank you to. Just from my experiences here in this town, in this community, I want to say, and he's not here, I want to say thank you to Dennis Chandler. And I think a lot of these kids in this room owe a lot to Dennis Chandler. I think a lot of these people in this room owe a lot to Harry Chandler, who the field up here is named after. I want to say thank you to Rich Newport. I want to say thank you to Gary Yates. And you guys, you told a story about the chicken coop. My good friend Cody Williams is going to come up here in a minute. He's going to tell you about the chicken coop. But I'm going to tell you what happened with the chicken coop. There's a kid who's pitching right now in the major leagues, in AAA. His name is Matt Capps. Matt Capps and I are great friends. Dad and him are great friends, and Matt had played for me and he played for Dad. And Matt forgot his roots one time. Matt called me in the middle of his rookie year. Said, John, I just can't figure it out. Can't figure it out. My dad's sick. I came home. Do you mind spending some time with me? And Dad said, son, why would I spend time with you? Dad to Matt, he goes, why would I spend time with you when you forgot where you came from? And Matt said, Mr. John, if you just talk to you and your daddy, would you please just take me to the chicken house? Just take me to the chicken house. When we went to that chicken house, a year and a half later, Matt Capps is in the big leagues. And I'll never forget it. That chicken house has meant more to a lot of people in this community. And it's crazy how that chicken house worked. And Cody's going to read about it. They'd be lined up day in and day out. A couple things that I took from Dad. He always tried to give his time back to enrich kids' lives through baseball. Baseball has always been his vehicle or his vessel to give freely to others and share his knowledge and experiences to hopefully better a young man's life. Those lessons we learned weren't always baseball related, and they weren't easy. I don't think they were they, Keith? Jeff, I don't think they were. Miko, they weren't easy, were they? They were hard lessons. They're the ones that shaped our lives. For those of us lucky enough to play for him. One of my favorite lessons I learned from him is to work hard and enjoy the game and play hard. And when you play hard and you practice hard, you get to enjoy the riches of your labor. And for you coaches that are back here, not that I'm any better than you, I've got an 8-year-old that I coach, but I learn from the best. And this is the thing that I think that everybody who ever played for him will know this. Miko's entry fee was the same as Brett Chandler's entry fee. All you coaches and all you people think y'all got the answers at 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And it's all about winning. It is the furthest thing from winning. The win comes from the way you raise these kids and the way you teach them, right from wrong. And the important lesson out of this is that every kid's entry fee was the same, and every kid sat the bench the same amount if you were the worst player or you're the best player. And I can remember him looking at me going, son, Miko Burchett can't chew bubble gum and walk straight. But he don't know that. And Miko was an undersized catcher, second baseman, platoon kid who played everywhere. Every time Gary Yates and Taylor Phillips put his name in the lineup, you knew he was going to play hard. Mr. Burchett, you ought to be proud of your kid. You raised him right. But Dad would say, son, I've tricked him again. I've tricked him into believing in himself. And those lessons learned in that chicken house taught kids like Cody Williams, Brett Chandler, myself, Matt Capps, to believe in yourself. And he just had a way of getting his point across. He had a way of making Keith Weir and Jeff Peters great players that maybe necessarily weren't great players, but he had a way of tricking us to believing in ourselves. We all played and we all sat the bench. We all built camaraderie. And at the end of the day, whether we won or lost, nobody really cared because we had a really, really good time. And I'm talking about guys that I spent time with when I was 6 years old. And I still remember sitting on the bench with them, being 6-year-old kids, 7-year-old kids, playing and having a good time. I want to thank you guys again for giving us the opportunity to be here. And Miko, Jenna, Mayor Robinson, City Council, our family will always be indebted to you guys for your act of kindness. It's humbling that you would even think that much of this man to put him out there. We all know what he is, but for the community to recognize who he is, it means a lot. And I'm going to turn this over to Cody, and I think this will best describe your chicken house. Thank you, guys.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So I am your only guest speaker tonight that did not make the printout, and that's because John called me in from the bullpen the moment I got here and said, hey, by the way, you're giving a speech. And I was like, okay, you're not kidding, this is serious. So John, well done, well said. All of everything that everyone said so far is true, and I've definitely experienced it in my own life. So we do have a gigantic crowd. Let's just see a raise of hands if Taylor coached one of your kids, or if you were one of the guys that played for him. I mean, so as you, yeah. So, I mean, as you look around the room, there's maybe 75, 100, 125 people here, and you see all the lives that have been impacted. And so John gave me this when I came up here today. This thing is dated March 3rd, 2006. And so I scratch my head and I go, good Lord, 10 and a half years ago. As a 31-year-old, I can tell you at that point I was a junior in college at Kennesaw State and obviously doing some sort of educational class because this is formally written. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of humble, but this is impressive, guys. I don't know where this went in the last 10 and a half years, but I need to find that guy again. I'm glad you found it. I'm going to get a copy from it. A man of your generation never throws anything away. I know that. So the title of this thing is simple. It's Burning Desire and Experience, the Key to Success. And so everyone's mentioned the chicken house, but if you were to ask anyone here what the chicken house was actually called by Taylor, it was called Yankee Stadium, right? And so everybody that was there, it was a dump. It was run down. It was one pitching stall in the middle of a barn with a cage that everybody would walk in there, you know, whether it was Thanksgiving, whether it was Christmas, whether it was spring break, whatever that looked like, because it was important. And so the title of this thing being Burning Desire, Taylor was going out of his way to instill in us that had the desire and the drive, he would pour into us. And so through the years, we were talking, and, you know, I can think back being probably 8, 9 years old was the first time he and I ever engaged. And that relationship continues to this day. And so as I look through this letter that I wrote, and you think back about the good times, John mentioned it, and I wrote it in this letter because I had interviewed him for this thing, and he talks about, Taylor, why do you do what you do? And obviously he was still coaching at that time, and it was because Cody, somebody gave me an opportunity, and I was fortunate, and so therefore I want to pass it on to others. And so in a generation, in a society where we live today, where it's all about me, you know, this guy went out of his way to change my life. And so, on a happy note, you know, this is an emotional time for me being thrown up here and just being asked to do this, but Taylor means the world to me. Those of you that know me know that. But it's funny because you think about the desire and why he did what he did. And John mentioned it. He signed in 1951 for $2,500. It's not like the big leaguers back in today's world where you made 10 million bucks and you were set for your life. That's not the way the world was. They did it because it was something they were passionate about and something they loved. And so that was what Taylor instilled in me, Miko, and all of the other guys that are here that played for Taylor. And so at the end of this letter that I wrote, there's a Pete Rose quote. Everybody knows Charlie Hustle, the passion that he played with and the desire that he had. And the quote simply says, "I would walk through hell in a gasoline suit every day just to play baseball." And so Taylor is that kind of guy. And if we gave him the health, I'm sure he would go out there today and do it. And I'm sure there's a lot of us in this room that would give anything up in the world besides our families to have that opportunity. So thank you for allowing me to be here. Taylor, thank you for all you've done. And let's continue.
Mr. Taylor, would you like to say anything before we unveil the signing, the field sign? Now is your opportunity.
Got it.
Thank y'all for coming out. If my pastors are here, if y'all got anybody that's going to take up collection, I would like to know who they've been talking about. It certainly wasn't me. But since they say it is me, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. They have talked about me, but I want to say thank you to this blonde-headed lady. The blonde hair, I put every one of them in her head. Patience she's had with me, what she's meant to me, what she's meant to our community, and our 4 children that are here. Deborah, can I just brag on my children for a minute? Do y'all mind? See how she raised them. Deborah Anderson, and she's married to Michael Anderson. She's the probate judge in Paulding County, and we're so proud of her. Karen, also Brooks, married to Dennis. She's just like her father. She's retired. She's retired from the Postal Service, and we're very proud of her, and her mother take up a lot of time together. And Kyle Phillips, the one that delivered such a nice invocation. He's at Yancey Brothers for 30 years. I'm so proud of Kyle and his family, Sandy. And John Phillips. John has a security company. He works out of Johnson City, Tennessee, and he was very fortunate that he could get here. And he don't know anything about this. Is it all right if I say something? He don't want me to. But he's married to Kristen, and he's got Noah over here sitting next to Bill. And we're so proud of our family, and I just praise the Lord for them and the opportunity to raise. And we have a little girl in Jamestown, Tennessee. She's a nurse. She couldn't be here. But we're so happy that we had the opportunity to raise these kids. We raised them all in the church. And you know what? All of them have always had jobs. And that's a great thing. But I really just say thank you for coming out tonight, for sharing your love with us. It's something I will never forget. And it's also something that I'm not worthy of. But I accept your love. And I thank you very, very much. Thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and unveil the new signage. Hunter Park Youth Baseball will open up their fall season on Saturday, September 17th. So this will now be Mr. Taylor Phillips Field. And we'll have all the signage updated for Saturday's competition.
All these dents in it look like somebody's been shooting at it already.
You were throwing BP earlier, Taylor. But the city also wanted to present you a plaque in appreciation and dedication for helping out our youth and a baseball bat. There you go, Mr. Taylor. So
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
You know, this will never have a ding in it because I couldn't hit. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Robinson, City Council, thank you.
All right, so feel free to enjoy some refreshments. Anybody? And we're gonna get a couple pictures. And like I said, kids, there's some cards up here that Mr. Taylor can autograph. So feel free to grab one, and we'll grab some pictures and enjoy some snacks. Thank you for coming out.